peace and healing. No designated space for easy breathing. No lucky ace to force winning. It takes as long as it takes. There ain't no race in healing. It takes as long as it takes. There ain't no race in healing. 40 days the holy man spent contemplating. 40 long cold nights thinking and weeping. So how long will you take in your wilderness? Grieving, it takes as long as it takes. 'Cause there ain't no race in healing. It takes as long as it takes. There ain't no race in healing. Maybe you heard been doing lots of praying. Lord, save me quick from this life I've been making. He said, let go and heal. Oh, what you got hurting. It takes as long as it takes. There ain't no race in healing. It takes as long as it takes. There ain't no race in healing. Well, I'm still in the thick of my deep soul searching. My 40 nights, 40 days is a journey with no ending. I found my peace, my soul every day unfolding. Gonna take as long as it takes. I'm just gonna keep healing. Gonna take as long as it takes. I'm gonna keep on healing. You can't race healing, feeling changing. Just keep on healing. Oh, you can't race grieving, weeping, oh, and learning. Oh, you gotta keep on healing. Here's Charlie.
Thank you, Deidrey. I could be introduced like that anytime. The Bible's book of Exodus is the story of my life. Now, before you decide that I'm suffering the onset of dementia, let me tell you that the whole Bible is the story of my life. And I assure you that I'm not suffering the delusion of grandeur. The Bible is a story of your life as well. Now, how can that be? If the Exodus actually happened, it was more than 3,000 years ago. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm nowhere near that old. Well, almost. Now, besides my age, or perhaps my lack of it, there's little evidence the Exodus actually happened. Other than the book of Exodus, there's little or no documentary evidence that the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt, or that a man named Moses led them through the wilderness to the promised land. In fact, there's very little in Exodus that could qualify as history. Now, the truth is that the Bible probably says more about our lives than it does about the history of Israel. Now, don't let that go to your head. A A lot of what it says about us you wouldn't want your friends to hear. So, who is the leading character in the story of our lives? Now, my part in the story is played by Moses. Yours too. That means that you and I share a lot of the personality traits the Bible describes about Moses. Lifespan is not something we share, at least I don't think it is. Moses lived to the age of 120. Taken literally, I don't expect to live that long. And according to the Aramaic scholar Rocco Errico, the ancient Jewish sages, including the writers of Genesis and Exodus, believed that Exodus was a divinely inspired book, but they did not take the text literally. The intent of writers in the ancient Middle East was to be interpreted metaphysically. Therefore, we have to consider the cultural setting when we attempt to understand the Bible. In his book, Understanding the Old Testament, Bernard W. Anderson wrote, "The Old Testament is sacred history to both Jews and Christians, because in these historical experiences as interpreted by faith, the ultimate meaning of human life is disclosed, as interpreted by faith." He concluded, "To put it in a nutshell, the Old Testament is Israel's witness to its encounter with God. You and I have the opportunity to accept the Old Testament to be witness to our own encounters with God." The writer said that Moses lived for 120 years. What were they really saying? Well, first of all, they divided Moses' life into 3 segments of 40 years each. The number 40 was taken to mean an unspecified long time. In other words, as long as it takes to properly complete something. So in Act 1, it took Moses 40 years of intellectual preparation before he was properly prepared to go on to the next step in fulfilling his divine purpose. We know from the Bible that Moses was raised in the Pharaoh's court. He was given the best education possible. He was trained in science, mathematics, government, military service, military science, the occult, and the priestly skills of magic. His intellect and reasoning were well trained, far above those of his fellow Israelites who were slaves. Now, different ones of us have undergone varying amounts of formal education, but one thing that most of us have in common is that we've spent far more time in intellectual preparation than we have in the spiritual. If that's true for you, then, like me, you have the most experience in Act 1. Literally, I've never been to Egypt. Spiritually, I can recall spending a weekend or 2 there. Metaphysically, Egypt represents our sensory or material consciousness. In other words, our spiritual ignorance. And I've got this one down pat. I'm never going to lie down on the railroad track. I know the freight train that runs over me is not going to be the cosmic freight train. A spiritual aha moment. Now, it's obvious that we do not want to stay in Egypt. Biblically, Egypt represents the solution to a problem. In the case of the Israelites, that problem was famine. They solved the problem by going to Egypt. Case closed, right? Wrong. The Pharaoh who welcomed the Israelites was replaced by another Pharaoh who made them slaves. Sometimes the solution to one problem becomes a new problem. Now, I have to tell you now that we also have Israelite characteristics. No one wants to be a slave, but what if the solution to one problem becomes our comfort zone? Have you ever wanted to stay in a circumstance you knew was not good for you? That's one example of the Israelites acting up in your consciousness. I can tell you about some comfort zones. I've been through a few. It's a good thing we're in the season of Lent. I've got a few outworn ideas I should give up. Anyway, it took Moses 40 years or an unspecified long time to get through this stage of God's plan. The divine plan, however, required Moses to move on to Act 2, his spiritual preparation. In the concluding scene of Act 1, Moses struck and killed an Egyptian overseer who'd been abusing Israelite slaves. That made Moses a persona non grata in Egypt. Now, if you had been an observer at that time, what would you have thought of Moses' chances to lead the Israelites out of Egypt? Judging by appearances, I might have concluded, well, that's it for Moses. His days are numbered. Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King, if they'd been there, might have advised Moses that violence was not the answer. Moses' rash act simply proved that he was not spiritually advanced enough to provide the leadership the Israelites needed. He was, therefore, forced to flee to the wilderness of Midian for the next 40 years of his spiritual journey. Act 2 represents the period of time required for Moses' spiritual preparation. Moses spent the next 40 years herding sheep. What better way can you think of to evolve spiritually? Without other people around all the time, how could Moses not spend time meditating? As I've thought about Moses' experience, I've concluded that I put in my 40 years of herding sheep. I don't mean literally herding sheep, though I have done that. The flock represents my thoughts and emotions. We know what happens when we get lax in our herding duties. Who's not familiar with the Mother Goose tale of Little Bo Peep who lost her sheep and didn't know where to find them? If we don't pay attention, they stray. We allow our thoughts to wander into areas of lack, limitation, or other forms of negativity. You know what I'm saying? Moses was 80 years old when God deemed him ready for Act 2. Well, he was almost ready. The wilderness of Midian had become a solution to a problem that Moses had. Let us not forget, Moses was wanted for murder. And having solved that problem, Moses did what I might have done. He got comfortable. He did not want to leave his new comfort zone. That's why God sometimes has to run over us with the cosmic freight train. If you encountered a burning bush and it was not being consumed by the flames, what would you think? Would you be just a little bit curious? I'd be amazed. Flabbergasted is not a powerful enough word. To make matters more unbelievable, the burning bush spoke to Moses. I wonder how I'd react if a burning bush called out to me, "Charlie! Charlie!" I likely would have been dumbfounded or have suspected a trick. I don't believe in the supernatural. Not in the 21st century anyway. But such a belief was not unusual in the time of Moses. The bush did speak to Moses. And that was Moses' cosmic freight train, his aha moment. He answered the bush. Moses had almost completed his 40 years of spiritual preparation. He said to the bush, "Here I am." Does it take 40 days or 40 years? Who knows? It takes as long as it takes. And then it may take a cosmic freight train to get one going. All I know is I'm not there yet. How about you? That's probably why we're told that it's a journey, not a destination. At the age of 80, Moses was finally ready to assume the role God had planned for him. Well, almost ready. Moses still had the comfort zone to deal with. Having solved the problem of the murder charge, Moses got comfortable and he didn't want to go back to Egypt. He didn't exactly say no to the burning bush, but he did come up with a bunch of excuses. If this is my story, I'd have been racking my brain for more excuses. Does that work in your story? First, Moses claimed to be unworthy of the task. He said, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? I've used an excuse like that myself. When God promised to be with him, Moses suggested that the Israelites wouldn't believe that he had divine authority and wouldn't follow him. Even when God promised to strike Egypt with all the plagues, Moses claimed that he wasn't a very good speaker. God promised that Moses' brother Aaron would be his mouthpiece. How many times have you told yourself that you were not worthy of a task you faced? How many of you have claimed that you could not speak publicly? How often do we, when we find out what it is we're to do, resist taking the first step to do it? I could write a book about all the things I never did because I resisted taking the first step. Back in the first 40 years of my life story, before I was ready to understand my spiritual nature, I would have been among those Israelites asking Moses the name of God for whom he claimed to speak. And it might have taken me another 40 years to understand his answer. God called himself, I am who I am, or I am for short. The short form is as good a definition of God as I can think of. We know that God's not a person, an object, or a thing. God simply is. Remember, it was just a few minutes ago we affirmed that God is. God did not say to Moses, tell him my name is I do. God does not do anything. God created human beings to be his hands and feet. We mortal beings do things, but God is the source of everything that we do. We may be mortal beings, but we're created in the image of God. Therefore, whenever I describe myself, I begin by saying, I am. Then I can choose to connect my sense of I am with a positive idea or a negative idea. I know that I'm going to experience that connection as part of my life condition. Therefore, it's important for me to have a positive understanding of my I am. We affirmed that also this morning. That may be what God had in mind when it commanded, you shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not quit anyone who misuses his name. Despite his protestations, Moses finally got it. So the Moses in you and in me persuaded the Israelites in you and in me to step beyond their comfort zones. The Israelites reluctantly committed themselves to try. They murmured a lot and had to spend 40 years in the wilderness preparing to enter the promised land. It took the plagues to persuade the Pharaoh in you and me to let the Israelites in you and me leave Egypt. The plagues represent the painful life experiences we endure because of our negative thinking and feeling. We suffer needlessly because of our ignorance and selfishness. And when we become aware that these problems are not permanent, and we surrender to the truth of the I am, then our egos, the Pharaoh in each of us, know that it would be better for us to allow the process of our spiritual our spiritual unfoldment to go forward. I hope that was a cosmic freight train. In other words, sooner or later, Pharaoh lets the people go. But even when we catch on, we're often tempted to look back so we can see the Egyptians in hot pursuit. We still encounter obstacles we fear we will be unable to overcome. The Red Sea appeared to be an obstacle to the fleeing Israelites. They believed they were trapped between the Egyptians and the sea. But when we're fully committed and we rely on God, things that appear to be obstacles are merely challenges that can lead us to greater opportunities and progress. The Red Sea turned out to be an obstacle to the pursuing Egyptians rather than the Israelites. I believe what actually happened was less spectacular than the scene produced by Cecil B. DeMille, or even described by the writer of Exodus. Remember, the writers did not expect to be taken literally. They wanted to get attention. They wanted to impress on later Israelites readers the importance of reliance on God. As Yogi Berra tried to tell us, it ain't over till it's over. For Moses and the Israelites, it wasn't over. They still had ahead of them an unspecified long time of wandering in the wilderness. Another 40 years. That would make me want to cry. Now, if you're curious about what 40 years in the wilderness is like, watch the movie Groundhog Day, starring Bill Murray. Okay, campers, rise and shine, and don't forget your booties because it's cold out there today. It's cold out there every day. What is this, Miami Beach? Not hardly. And you know you can expect hazardous travel later today with that blizzard. You know, that blizzard thing? Oh well, here's the report. The National Weather Service is calling for a big blizzard thing. Yes, they are. But you know there's another reason why today is especially exciting. Especially cold. Especially cold, but the big question on everybody's lips. Their chapped lips. Yes, their chapped lips, right? Do you think Phil is going to come out and see his shadow? Punxsutawney Phil? That's right, woodchuckers. It's Groundhog Day. Get up and check that hog out there. That message, and Sonny and Cher singing, "I've Got You, Babe," woke TV weatherman Phil Connors on Groundhog Day. Again, again, and again. And a long, unspecified number of agains. I don't mean that weatherman Connors experienced this on successive Groundhog Days. He found himself in a time warp and experienced the same Groundhog Day again, again, and again, etc. Now Phil began to panic. He was wondered if he was doomed to live the same miserable day for the rest of his life. He said, I wake up every day right here, and there's nothing I can do about it. Have you ever felt that way? The same bad things happen to you again and again, and there's no way out. I've read of one person who received a homemade get well card that might have been appropriate. On the outside it read, "It's times like these that we learn and grow." On the inside it said, "What a stupid system." So, at the end of each repeated day, Phil was held back. He didn't get promoted to the next level. He woke up to the same radio spiel, encountered all the same people, and discovered that it was Groundhog Day all over again. And Phil met each day's encounters and experiences with less patience than the one before. His hopes to graduate out of this vicious cycle appeared dimmer than ever. Phil took to drinking. But a lot of us learned the hard way. You can't drown your sorrows, you just teach them to swim. Even other boozers seemed to have a better grip than Phil did. A fellow drunk hit the nail on the head. Looking at his glass of beer and questioning whether it was half full or half empty, he said to Phil, "I think of you as a half-empty kind of guy." Like the Israelites in the wilderness, Phil took to murmuring. What chance did he have to live his dreams when even a drunk could spot his negativity? We all know people who have this half-empty kind of outlook. If you're like most of us, you've been there, done that yourself. Remember those occasions when you traveled a vicious circle rather than a spiritual path? Who gave you directions? And what was your attitude when you did? Did your negative outlook ever show you the way you wanted to go? Emily Cady, in Lessons in Truth, wrote, "To educate never means to force into from the outside, but always means to draw forth from within something already existing there. God, as infinite wisdom, lies within every human being, only waiting to be led forth into manifestation." The key to Phil's release from the eternal Groundhog Day was, as we all know, already within him. It just took getting hit repeatedly by the same cosmic freight train before he finally began to get it. Renewal is an idea John Gardner, founder of Common Cause, turns to again and again. As he said, it's what you learn when you know it all that counts. The trouble with using experience as a guide to the final exam is that the final exam often comes first, then the lesson. Unfortunately, the obvious characteristic of the know-it-all is the tendency to give up learning. Now, I can't speak for any of you, but I'm guessing that all of us have spent our 40 days or 40 years wandering in the wilderness. None of us attained spiritual understanding from our first time in Sunday school. Even Jesus, our elder brother and way shower, had to spend 40 days in the wilderness before he was ready to begin his ministry. Fortunately, it doesn't matter how many times you don't get it. The kingdom is just as close at hand as it would have been if you'd gotten it the first time. We know that Phil was beginning to see the light when he said, I know. You make choices, and you live with them. He seemed ready to take responsibility for his actions. And when Phil said, I don't care what happens tomorrow or for the rest of my life, I'm happy now, we know he's reached a turning point. The circumstances of Phil's life have not changed, but we see a great change in his outlook. When he arrived in Punxsutawney, his actions were motivated by selfishness. He felt unloved, and he waited for others to reach out and touch him. They didn't. By his last recycled day, without realizing he'd changed, he was giving out love to the world of Punxsutawney. He began to use his ability to see foresee the day's events, to do good deeds. He made people feel good. He shared his talents. Much to his surprise, the whole world loved him in return. Now, a great-granddaughter of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, Connie Fillmore Bozzi, wrote in the Unity Guide to Healing. In it she wrote, it's never too late to begin again, to put old failure and negation behind. It's never too late to begin again with a completely new attitude, to live with Christ in newness of life. A minister told this story about two of his parishioners. As I was leaving church one Sunday, an elderly couple slowly moved down the narrow walk that led to the parking area. I tried to make my way around them, but they stopped to smell some flowers. When I tried to slip past, the woman bent over to smell a red rose, blocking my passage. Then the man smelled the rose. I waited patiently along with others. As the man straightened up, he turned to me. It took us almost a lifetime to learn to do that, he said, and then moved on. There's a lot going on in the world that we don't like. We don't have to approve of it, but we don't have to be half empty. As soon as we see our lives as half full, it won't be long before we see them as full. Today can be the first day of the best part of your life. Learn from your wilderness experiences. Now, I'd like to think the leading man in my wilderness experience is played by Charlton Heston. More likely, it was Bill Murray. What I learned is just take the time to smell the roses and spread joy.
Thank you, Charlie, for your beautiful message. I love your messages. Okay, let's sing this one.
I am the one within you. I am the infinite presence. I am the one and all. I am the truth in beauty, the The arms of love await you with these golden wings. Take flight. I am the infinite presence. I am the one and all. I am the one in all. I am the truth and beauty. I am the truth and beauty. The answer to Spirit's call. The answer to Spirit's call. I am the one within you. I am the one within you. I am the one you seek. I am the one you see. Within your heart there's a doorway. Within your heart there's a doorway. The arms of love await you with these golden wings. Take flight.
As we prepare to spend a few moments in the silence, I quote to you this pearl of wisdom from the Gospel of Luke. The crooked shall be made straight, and the rough ways made smooth. So I invite you to become comfortable in your chairs. Allow your thinking to slow, to allow your minds to know peace. And now, if you're willing, allow my words to be your words. Life is full of surprises. I welcome some. Some I do not. I know that the unplanned are not always bad. I remain steady when events do not turn out as I expect. I know the presence of God helps me get my mind in order, leading me to an orderly life. Worldly matters may be in disarray, but God's order is always mine. I relax into the divine presence and feel peace and clarity, bringing order to my mind and body. My breathing slows and my shoulders relax as I regain my ability to think calmly and clearly. I pause, go within, and align my mind and heart with the easy rhythm of the universe in the silence. Now, I consider any part of my life where I may need more order and organization. I affirm. I see and bring forth divine order in my relationships. I invoke divine order in my work. All is in right order in my home. Harmony, balance, and order now reign in my church, my community, and throughout the world. As I come out of meditation, I know that all is well. Amen.
Let us sing this one together, In the Garden.
I come to the garden alone while the dew is still on the roses, and the voice I hear falling on my ear, love within discloses, and he walks with me and he talks with me and he tells me I am his own, and the joys we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. God speaks, and the sound of its voice is so sweet. The birds hush their singing, and the melody Spirit sings through me. Within my heart is ringing, and he walks with me and he talks with me and tells me I am his own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. God speaks, and the sound of his voice, I'll stand in the garden with thee, and it bids me go, a gentle nudge I know, the voice of God is calling, and he walks with me and he talks with me and tells me I am his own, and the joys we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. And the joys we share as we tarry there, none